to people afterwards. Right, so welcome, first of all, to all three of you. I think it's three at the moment. This evening session is really just an introduction, I suppose, to funding your Masters of Contemporary Education. And today's session will essentially sort of split into two sections, if you like. We'll give Lisa the opportunity to speak to you about funding in general, and then when it comes to the Teach NZ Study Awards, I'd say a little bit more about that. But before we get going, we'll begin as we always do. Karakia, anybody like to lead it? Dor, Lisa? Yep, thanks, Dor.
Ko te kawa o runga, ko te kawa o raro, ko te kawa o rā, ko te kawa o rā. E rongo whakairihia ki runga, turuturu o whitu whakamaua kia tēnā, tēnā hui e taiki e.
Thank you very much, Dor. Right, okay, so I think at this point it's probably a good idea for us to introduce ourselves. So, Dor, maybe you can start and just introduce yourself, and then I'll ask Lisa to do so afterwards before I go.
Kia ora, talofa lava. My name is Dorcas Case, and I'm one of the facilitators on the Masters of Contemporary Education course, and here to help and support you right to the finish line. So you'd probably see a lot of me if you had signed up into the Masters course, and if so, I'll look forward to seeing you there.
Thanks, Dor. Lisa, you'd like to introduce, well, most people know you already, I suppose, don't they?
Kia ora, ko Punua te para, ko Warawa te awa, ko Whittington Slater whānau. Ko Lisa tōku ingoa. Yes, you may well all have talked to me. I'm our outreach manager, and I'm here to help with any questions you may have in your journey to start our Master of Contemporary Education. We're all here to help you and support you. Kia ora.
Right, I suppose that leaves me. So introduce myself very quickly. My name is Herbert Thomas. I'm the program lead for the Master of Contemporary Education, and really happy to have you here this evening. Please feel free at any time to ask us any questions. You can stop us in mid-slide. We're quite happy with that. And then we can have a bit of a chat about something that'll be useful. Right, okay. So this is really just to put things in perspective. I suppose the program fees for 2024, Master of Contemporary Education, you can see that the full program, that means parts 1, 2, and 3. And when I say part 1, I'm speaking about the DCL, because the DCL is part 1, the postgraduate certificate. So all three parts together, $12,400. But if you're following parts 2 and 3 only, that's $9,000. And then, of course, if you're studying internationally, those are the international fees, either for studying in New Zealand or for studying offshore. So that's just to put in perspective what we'll be speaking about today. So without further ado, I think I'll ask Lisa to speak to us a little bit about funding your Masters in general.
Thank you, Herbert. Just to let you know, we've got a range of ideas to help you fund your Masters, to try to help remove that barrier. So if you have any questions or aren't sure, please reach out to me. But there is a study link. We have a range of scholarships for domestic students, and we have early bird discount of 10% if you enroll 4 weeks prior to the start of the program. Herbert and Dor will be talking you through how we can support with Teach NZ. And we have a template that you can massage to use to approach your board, your principal, your school, your kahoyako, or any other groups you may be part of that articulates the why to gain support, whether it be time or money or both. And we have a list of external funding ideas available, which we will share if you're interested. And when the slides are sent after this meeting, you'll be able to click and view them. If you could go to the... So for our academic EX domestic scholarships, we have a range of scholarships, a limited number of them, for 50% of the fee for the Master of Contemporary Education. Tangata Whenua, Pacific Ako, Taipeki for those over 60, and Impact. And Impact's around those with the intent to do good for the world, people, the planet. And again, if you're not sure of ideas for wording or a bit shy and you don't see yourself in one of those, reach out to me. I'm happy to take you through it. Our scholarship can't be combined with our early bird discount, so it's one or the other. And so when you apply, there's two processes to apply for our scholarship. So you apply to enroll, and then you go to a different area on our website, and I can send you all the links as well, to apply for our scholarship. So do two different processes, and if you do one without the other, they can't proceed. So if that happens, I'll reach out to you and I'll walk you through the process. Ka pai, Herbert.
Wonderful. Okay. I don't know what I obviously did something there that I shouldn't have. Sorry about that. Okay. Right. So we'll go on to the next one. So let's say a little bit about the MCE and the next starting dates, the next intake and so forth. So just important to note that scholarship applications close 2 months before the start date of the program. And if you look at our start dates for July, those are the start dates at the bottom. MCE July 2024 Part 1, those, in other words, who have not yet completed Part 1, enroll or begin their studies rather on the 16th of July. And those who enroll in Part 2 begin on the 15th of July. And those are the end study dates as well. Now, the reason why we're giving you these dates as well is because the application forms that you'll fill in for Teach NZ actually require these. So a lot of the information in the slide set is information that you're going to need to be able to complete your application for Teach NZ. So what we will do, of course, is we'll make the slide set available to you afterwards so that you have access to all of this information. So don't feel you have to write down furiously now. That's not necessary. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Teach NZ Study Awards. So if you want to find it on the internet, it's actually very easy. If you go to your browser and you simply type in Teach NZ Study Awards, it'll take you to the page and you can actually have a look at it. But what we're providing you with in the slide set is some of the sort of key aspects you need to be aware of as you complete and as you apply for these study awards. So we speak shorthand of study awards, but in fact, they're actually three different things, three separate things. So you can apply for a study award, you can apply for a sabbatical, and you can apply for a study grant, and they're quite different. And of course, the eligibility is quite different as well. So study awards enable teachers and principals to complete part-time or full-time study in an educational priority area. So normally we would say that you'd be studying full-time if you had a study award. Sabbaticals enable teachers and principals to have an opportunity to spend 3, 5, or 10 weeks completing a professional learning activity. And study support grants to secondary and area school teachers allow them to undertake study or research while continuing to teach. So they're slightly different things. And of course, as you read the documentation on the site, you become aware of the big differences. I think what's important to understand is that the study awards actually enable you to study something full-time if you so wish. And I think it's up to a maximum of 32 weeks worth of study. Sabbaticals, you'll see, are much shorter. So it's 3, 5, 10 weeks. And the support grants are to enable you to study whilst you teach. So those are three quite separate sort of categories. So very important to realize is before you even begin to apply for a Teach NZ Study Award or sabbatical, you're going to need an ESL or rather you're going to need an existing ESL role or with an account and a login. So you can have a look at the link on the slide, of course, but if you don't currently have, and I think that's an education sector logon is what ESL stands for. If you don't currently have an education sector logon, then you need to speak to the person at your school who is the delegated authority. That person will be able to actually get you up and running on the ESL system. Right? So if you don't have a number like that, speak to somebody at your school who's the delegated authority on that authorizer. That person will be able to set that up for you quite easily. Right. So let's have a look at how Teach NZ actually assess the applications that come in. So the priorities that they're interested in is completing a level 9 Bachelor of Education teaching qualification, or undertaking study or research that furthers and contributes to the Ministry of Education's priorities in education. We'll say a bit more about that later. And if you think about the Ministry of Education's priorities, there's 3 sort of bullet points there that cover the most important ones. Obviously, the achievement of Maori Pacific students, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds and their achievement, and then, of course, the learning of students with learning support needs. So those 3 are very clear Ministry of Education priority areas. But once they've looked at those factors, they also look at the following. Right? They're going to look at the completeness and clarity of your application. And that's one of the reasons why we're having this workshop today, so we can help you with the clarity of your application. They're also interested in the benefits to you, your students, your school, your community. Issues you face because of distance or professional isolation. That's another possible thing they might look at. But all in all, of course, the panel's role is to ensure that the process is open, fair, consistent, impartial, provides equal opportunities, non-discriminatory, etc. So those are sort of the main criteria that are applied in terms of the applications that they receive. So just to put it into perspective for you, the 3 large groups that we find tend to apply for the Master of Contemporary Education are, to a lesser extent, area schools, but certainly primarily primary school principals and teachers and secondary school teachers. Those are the 2 big groups that really apply. Now, what makes it a bit confusing is that if you look at those 3 groups on the slide, the closing dates are different across the 3. So you'll see, for example, that the area school teacher study awards close on the 8th of May, as do the secondary teacher awards, also close on the 8th of May. The primary principals and teachers only close on the 27th of June. In fact, the primary principals and teachers study awards aren't open yet. So if you go to the site, there isn't actually the option to apply for that at the moment. There isn't a link to an application form. So the link that I provided at the bottom of the slide takes you to the Teach NZ Study Awards site. So when you have the slide set in front of you, you'll be able to click directly into the site, and that should be helpful to you, hopefully. Okay. So let's have a look at the primary study award and what the eligibility is. What do you have to do or be to be able to apply? So the first thing is you have to hold a full and current practicing certificate. You need to be a full-time or part-time teacher or principals, either in a state or state integrated school in New Zealand. You have to have the support of your principal and board of trustees or your employers, the case might be. You have to be employed either under the PTCA, which is Primary Teacher Collective Agreement, or Primary Principal Collective Agreement, or applicable individual employment agreement. You have to have at least 3 years experience as a fully certified teacher in New Zealand. You have not, and of course, this is important, it's important that you have not received a Teach NZ Study Award or sabbatical in the last 5 years. So if you received it in the last 5 years, then you don't qualify to apply again until 5 years have elapsed, obviously. I think the last point at the bottom is really important as well. You can't actually undertake a study award at the same time as being appointed to Kui Ako, a cross-community school role. So that's important.
Sorry,
Yes, Marlene.
does that include if you're a within school lead too, or just an across school lead?
As far as I know, it's a cross-school lead. As far as I know, it's a cross-school lead. So it's not in
Because
school.
I'm a within school lead, so that'll be fine. I can still apply maybe.
I think that should be okay.
Okay, cool.
Yes. We've had people who've been within school lead in the past and there hasn't been a problem. So that should be
Okay,
fine.
awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions around anything I've said so far? I'll stop here for a second.
I've got a question.
Yes.
So in the previous slide, you mentioned that the one for primary school is not open yet. So 27 June, I think then, yeah, 27 June.
Yep.
So does that mean if I went for that, I would be applying to study for next year and not the one that you mentioned just a few slides ago? Is
Yes.
that yes? Okay.
Yes, exactly. You'll be studying for next year. So, and what that means quite simply is we haven't yet finalized the intake dates for next year, but it's very likely that there'll be an intake in January, 15th, 16th of January, somewhere around there. So that'll be the next one. But in answer to your question, yes, you're absolutely right. These Teach NZ Study Awards are for next year, so they're not for this year. I think the other thing to remember about the study awards for next year is, let's say for argument's sake, that you decide you're not going to study in January, you're going to wait until the second intake, which let's say for argument's sake begins in July, August, then that's no problem. You can actually apply for that as well, because you'll still have a number of months that will actually lie in next calendar year. So when you apply for these awards, they apply to a calendar year. So that means if you apply for an award, you apply for an award that relates to study that takes place in 2025. If you are studying after that, then of course that is no longer covered by the study award. So what it means quite simply is the time that you take off for your full-time studies, if you get a study award, that time has to actually happen in 2025. Is that clear to everybody?
So Herbert, if we don't have the specific start date in January 2025 would be enough, or
Yes,
not?
yes, that would be fine. In fact, yes, that should be fine. January 2025 should be fine. That should be okay. Yeah, that won't be a problem. Yeah, I can't give the exact date, but it's going to be around about the middle of January, be about the 15th, 16th, somewhere around there. But yes, let's use that in the time. Just January 25 will be fine.
Also, I'm currently doing the DCL part.
Yep.
That's like the part one of the whole
Yes, it is.
MCQ
Yes, it
course.
is.
And when does it start for the part one masters start for me? Will that start next year?
Okay, so let's think about your situation. When do you
Yeah.
actually complete the DCL?
Is it 20 weeks or?
Yes, it's normally about 22 weeks. That sounds right. Yes. Yeah.
So if this week is week 13, does that mean within the next 7 weeks then?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
do I pretty much just miss this whole thing then?
Well, look, that's your choice. Obviously, you could, in theory, wait for part 2 in January and then study from there, but it means you're wasting 6 months. That's absolutely your choice, obviously.
Yeah, I don't want to waste that 6
No, I
months.
didn't think you would. I didn't think you would.
Yeah.
But remember what Lisa was saying earlier on. So
About
that
the
doesn't mean you're going to be
Pacific one,
applying
maybe?
for this award, but
Yeah.
you could still be applying for a scholarship from Academy EX, etc.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, that's still
Okay.
possible. So the Teach NZ Study Awards are separate from the Academy EX Awards or scholarships. That's important.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so the secondary study awards eligibility are really quite simple, similar to the primary. You're employed under the Secondary Teachers Collective Agreement or applicable individual employment agreement, permanently appointed full-time or part-time, is in a New Zealand state or state integrated school, full-time, long-term relieving or fixed-term teacher in New Zealand state or state integrated school. So that's a slight difference, right? You can be a long-term relieving or fixed-term teacher. You cannot undertake a study award again, as we said, if at the same time you are appointed to a community teacher or cross-community schools role is what they're talking about then. So very similar sort of eligibility requirements. So this is the structure of the program. Now, when you complete the application form, one of the things they're going to be asking you is, what are the courses you will be studying as part of your study? And of course, they're looking for the course code, like MLED 8201. They're looking for the course name, like contemporary teaching. And they're looking for the number of credits. So that's the number in brackets, right? So for example, if you look at part 2, the course code is MLED 8201. The name is contemporary teaching. The credits are 15. So let me explain how the structure of this program works. So part 1, which is the DCL, which is what, Marlene, you're doing at the moment, consists of 2 courses, DCL LC 8001, Digital Collaborative Transformation and Learning and Leadership. And there's a second course, DCLC 8002, Leading Research Informed Innovation and Practice. So those 2 are compulsory. You have to complete them to go into part 2. Part 2 is similar, consists of 2 courses, Contemporary Teaching and Applied Methods. You have to follow both courses. You don't have a choice. But then when you get to part 3, you do actually have a choice. You can either do a 90-credit practice-based research project, or you can do a 45-credit practice-based change project, as well as 3 electives. Now, those are the choices you have to make. Now, of course, you won't necessarily know at this stage whether you're doing a 90-credit project or whether you're doing a 45-credit project. You won't know that. So what I suggest you do for your application, just for the purposes of Teach NZ, is indicate that you'll be doing the 90-credit practice-based research project in part 3. If you then decide not to do that during part 3, that's not really the end of the world. It's not that big a deal. So what I've included in this slide is just all of the course codes so that you can see them. These are all of the course codes for all of the courses. So when you complete your application, you can actually look at this slide and you'll have the course names and course codes for everything. Right. Now, this is quite an important sort of thing to understand, and that is what you want to do when you fill in your application is you want to ensure that you are aligning your application actively to the National Educational Learning Priorities, right? The NELP document. So there's a link on the slide to the NELP document. So what's important is you want to align your application to those priorities, but you also want to use the same language that they use in the priorities. Because immediately when they assess your application, they can see that it's linked directly to that document. So that's quite important. As I mentioned earlier on, you won't know yet exactly what your project is going to be about, and that's okay. So what you do in your application is you describe the project knowing what you know now, right? But you also indicate that the project focus will be refined during your MCE studies. So during part 2 of the MCE, you'll be able to refine your ideas around the project. And so it might look slightly different at the end of part 2 going into part 3. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. That's okay. So we don't expect you to have a complete idea of what you're going to do at the moment. That's not necessarily the case. But I think the really important thing on this slide is when you fill in that application, have that National Education Learning Priorities document open on your desktop so that you can refer to the priorities and try to incorporate some of the language from the priorities in your application. That definitely helps, definitely puts you in a good place. So one of the things that they ask you to do on the application form is to describe your proposed study, right? So they'll say to you, for example, describe how your proposed study meets the purpose of the study support grant. So in other words, how does it hit those things that these guys are interested in? Like, for example, are you completing a degree? Well, technically you are. For instance, in Marlene's case, you're in the process of completing part 1. So what you're looking for is you're looking for a study award for parts 2 and 3 to enable you to complete the master's degree. So yes, that helps, right? That helps. But also you could say things like, well, I actually work in an environment where the achievement of Maori Pacific students is absolutely important, obviously. For example, I might have many Maori and Pacific students in my classes and so forth, or I might be very, very far from another university, and so this particular study suits me because I can't easily get to a university to study, for example, etc., etc. So I suppose in answering this thing, you want to think about how, for example, if you think about what you do in the Masters is you undertake parts 2 and 3, but more specifically, during part 3, you actually implement a practice-based change project. And that project is designed not only to, of course, enhance your own practice, but it's also designed to have a positive influence on your school, the learning of your students, potentially the community, and potentially other educators in the region or in the country, or whatever the case might be. So it does have repercussions for larger communities beyond your classroom. I think that's important. And that last point is really important, right? Identify the challenge or problem in your context that fits with the ministry goals and priorities. So what is it in your context that relates to the priorities in that NELP document? If you think about the NELP document, which aspects of the NELP document are actually related to the problem or challenge in your context? That's important to point out in your application. They'll also ask you about your study plan. If your plan includes gaining practical knowledge, undertaking research or other study that is school-related project, provide a brief description. Now, yeah, of course, you can actually speak at length about your practice-based change project, what you intend doing in that project. You want to relate the problem or challenge to your context. So in other words, what you want to show is how those national educational learning priorities relate to your context and what you're doing and what your project is about. Of course, the program deals with contemporary pedagogical approaches, and so that's relevant to education. And some part of your project will also involve digital fluency and the effective use of digital technology. So that is a focus area as well of the education ministry at the moment. Has been for some time, actually. So this practice-based change project, just to explain it a little bit more so you know what I'm talking about. So the practice-based change project is a capstone course, which means it really builds on the outcomes of part 1 and part 2. You could look at it another way. You can say that during parts 1 and parts 2, what happens is you actually given all of the theoretical knowledge you need to be able to implement your project in part 3. So it's a final, in your case, it's going to be a 90 credit course, not a 60 credit course. A final 90 credit course where you'll demonstrate your capability in leadership and collaboration towards a positive change through a practice-based change project. You're going to be using contemporary pedagogical knowledge to address an education challenge in your own context. So you're going to be leading the project, you're going to be evaluating the project, and of course, you're responsible for implementation itself. So clearly, there's a requirement for you to attend face-to-face sessions. We have 2 sessions a year in Auckland, and there are also many online workshops that you'll be attending as well. Finally, you present your project to your peers and others at the end of part 3 at the Mind Lab or Academy EX Symposium. So that's quite important as well, because sometimes in the application, they'll say to you, how will you disseminate the results of your project? By that, they mean, how will you make the findings of your project known to other people? And then you can actually say, well, actually, we have a symposium at the end of part 3 where we present our project to not only our peers and other people involved in the same studies, but other stakeholders interested as well. So that's great. One way of disseminating. I'm also going to ask you, well, what are the benefits of your study actually? So yeah, you want to outline the benefits of the study or qualification to you personally. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to you professionally? What does it mean to your students? What does it mean to your school, the community, education sector, etc.? So some of the things you can think about here, for example, are Do you work at a low decile school? Because potentially, of course, low decile schools are a focus area for the ministry, as indicated earlier on. The same with the particular socioeconomic makeup of the community. That's also an issue. Do you, in your classrooms, have students with very specific learning needs? Because, of course, that's a focus area as well. So you can see that there are a number of different ways in which you can actually speak about the benefits of your study. But what you want to try and do is you want to try to relate your study to, again, the National Education Learning Priorities document, as well as what this particular Teach NZ study grant panel is looking for when it evaluates your project, your application. Right? Look at what the panel's looking for, look at what the NELP document looking for, and try to relate your project to areas in those two documents. That's actually quite important. It's going to ask you what recent study have you done. Now, for many of you, that's an easy one to answer. You'll simply say, I've completed the postgraduate certificate in digital adaptive learning. That represents 1/3 of my master's degree. I now want to complete the master's degree. I want to do the other 2/3. And that's actually what I want the study award for. So that's a really good sort of way of approaching it.
Herbert,
And then
if
the
we've
person,
done,
yes.
Herbert, if we've done other courses in study, like I'm doing, not intentionally, but conjointly doing something else at the moment,
Yeah.
how far back do they want that recent study to be noted?
When they speak about recent, they often mean sort of 5 years-ish, more or less within 5 years. But again, if you've studied something that's relevant, you can mention it, obviously. Absolutely mention it. I mean, it's better to mention it than not mention it, I would say. So yeah, by all means do that. So the last thing they might ask you is a personal statement, right? How does this study help you to address major disadvantages you've experienced? And this is sort of aimed at people who find themselves in very small rural schools, far away from large centers. They can't actually travel into a university for contact study, that sort of thing. It could be that there's a socioeconomic status of the school or the community that presents certain challenges, or there might be other things relating to your school that present particular challenges to you as a teacher, not only personally, but in your professional capacity, right? And in terms of professional development, how do you, is it easy for you at your current school to gain access to professional development, or isn't it? Is it something that's just very difficult, for example? So the personal statement's going to differ from person to person, and of course, there are different things that you'll be able to draw on them. But again, if you can bring it back to that NELP document, or you can bring it back to the Teach NZ panel requirements, brilliant. That's great. Okay. Right. I think this is the point in today's session where I've done a lot of speaking, and now it's really up to you to ask me any questions that you might have. I also accept that this has been a very sort of quick sort of skim through some of the key issues. So maybe let me explain quickly how we do this, how we've done this in the past. What we've done is we've run this session. Once the session's over, what will happen is you'll get a recording of the session and you get a slide set so that you can look at the slides and follow the links and so forth. Then what happens is you'll go away and you'll have a go at actually completing the application forms. Once you've done that, what you can do is you can contact Lisa. The contact details are actually on the slide set. And you can contact myself as well, but contact Lisa predominantly, I think. And what Lisa will do is she will channel your applications to myself and to Dor and potentially one or two others. We'll then get back to you and say, look, we think this is a good application, but we think it's missing A, B, and C. Or have a look at the way in which you phrase this. This might be a better way of phrasing it. So we'll give you some help in terms of, the application itself, and hopefully that sort of gets you over the line. That's the idea, anyway. So that's more or less the process we've followed in the past, and it works fairly well. I'm pretty confident. Okay,
Excuse me.
question, anybody?
can I just, if you're going to send your application in for feedback, which is a really good idea to get a second pair of eyes on it, is please make it editable, whatever you're using.
Yes. Thanks, Lisa. Good reminder. Yes, please. Yep. So send it to us, preferably in sort of Microsoft Word format if you can. But in any case, it does have to be editable, otherwise we can't really help. It's very difficult for us to help.
Herbert,
Yes.
can you please tell me when the applications for the Teach NZ Primary Scholarship go live, when we can start applying?
I can. I'm just going to stop the recording. I'll stop.